Our last speaker online, I don't really know how to introduce him. I think everybody knows him as Joy, but as we're in a formal setting.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate the introduction and hosting this event. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone at Oxford. I appreciate this opportunity and for having me. As Chris pointed out, introducing me is a little challenging, but I would like to start by saying, on that note, and as to what I myself have had to face, you've heard the stories from the families of some of the victims, our former Chief Justice, human rights activists. Just like them, there are hundreds, if not thousands of not just Awami League politicians, but also journalists, editors, media owners who were not involved in politics, not involved in government, yet they remain behind bars for over 2 years now, everyone charged with murder. I am not, I hold no office in the Awami League. I'm simply a member. I held no position in the government other than being the honorary advisor for information technology, and I ran the Awami League's election campaign media department, if you will. I set that up and I ran that. I have lived abroad almost my entire life. I have lived here in the US for almost 30 years. And in 2024, I had only been to Bangladesh once for about a week to 10 days, which was in April. Yet I have been charged, and again, this is from what I've heard in the media, because I have received nothing from any courts or government or any notice whatsoever. I have been charged with murder during the July riots when I was 8,000 miles away. I have been charged with genocide for approving the shutdown of the internet upon instruction from the Prime Minister, from my mother, which I tried to push back against for as long as I could until the situation had gotten out of control. But a lot of what happened in Bangladesh at the time was standard operating procedure for many governments when a situation gets that violent. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of that. But what you're seeing now, since then, you're seeing this red herring and a huge cover-up. The Awami League is being blamed. The Awami League is being blamed for deaths. And unfortunately, many credible international groups and organizations are providing that cover. And that is what is deeply disturbing right now. It starts with the UN report, and I want to tackle that head on. The UN report unequivocally blames the Awami League government for the deaths of 1,400 people, 1,400. However, at the same time, the Yunus regime's own count is 834. To this day, now our lawyers have written to the United Nations again and again, asking for the list of names of the 1,400 victims. We have not heard back at all. There has been no response. So first of all, you have the government in Bangladesh itself, the Yunus government, only claiming 834 deaths or 836, something like that, but the UN claiming 1,400. Even if you look at those figures, there were at least 44, the UN acknowledges 44 police officers killed. The actual number is probably far higher because so many are still missing. You have hundreds of Awami League activists and leaders that were killed during that period. Forget about the period after, because the UN report only covers the period from July 15th to August 15th. There, as you've heard from some of the other speakers, there have been hundreds of deaths since, including in judicial custody. Yet, all of these deaths are blamed on the government. The one thing no one talks about, a couple of the speakers here have brought it up, but when I have spoken with many of these international organizations, the one thing that none of them have an answer to is the indemnity ordinance that was issued by the US government. How can you, why was it necessary? Why was it necessary to pass a law indemnifying protesters from all killings? If they weren't responsible for any killings, why was that necessary? So the indemnity ordinance itself is admission from the Yunus regime and the protest leaders that they killed people. They killed police officers. They killed Awami League activists. Otherwise, the indemnity ordinance would not have been necessary at all. So just to blame the Awami League is a red herring. And then, we've talked about the human rights situation in Bangladesh, that things weren't perfect in the past. Without a doubt, they were not, even under our government. But if you're going to indemnify the killing of political activists, police officers, if you're going to indemnify the killing of hundreds, if you're going to ignore the continued killing of Awami League activists and leaders, if you're going to ignore extrajudicial killings in custody, both during the Yunus regime and ongoing, then why blame the Awami League? If this is acceptable, if these deaths are all legal, if the killings of police officers and Awami League activists is legal, then why blame the Awami League at all? What you have instead, and another thing that the Awami League was blamed for were the elections, that they were controversial. And yet you had recently an election in Bangladesh where the largest political party, with almost half the voters in the country, has been completely banned, not allowed to conduct any political activity, and the elections rubber stamped. We have enough cell phone recorded footage of election manipulation, election rigging, ballot boxes being stuffed in the middle of the night. And you've had all of these international organizations provide a cover for this. They have accepted the elections. They have merely mentioned the banning of the largest political party as a slight footnote, that it did not affect the outcome of what would happen in Bangladesh. Now, such mechanisms, such cover-ups are sustainable for a short time. They're sustainable in the short run, but they're never sustainable in the long term. What you had during the 2 years of the Yunus regime was completely unconstitutional. This was an unelected government. This was an unelected regime that seized power. What they tried to do, what they tried to have, and what they call it a revolution. A revolution is a takeover of power, an overthrow where you seize power and rewrite your own rules. But they were not able to do that. So then they tried to run under the cover of an interim government, which there is no such thing in any constitution, certainly not in the Bangladesh constitution. They amended laws, including passing the indemnity law, indemnifying protesters, as well as amending the laws that create and govern the International Crimes Tribunal to allow them to go after political parties, political actors, and hold people without bail indefinitely. None of this did they have the authority to do. They did not have the constitutional or legal authority to do. It was for a future parliament to be ratified, which in itself is a joke. And the BNP, for all their promises of change, reform, what did they do? This was something I privately had predicted with most of our leaders and activists, that no, the BNP is not going to do any of that. Once they're in power, they are going to consolidate their power. They ratified all these amendments. Why? Because they did not have to take the blame for banning the Awami League. That blame passed on to Yunus, and Yunus was no longer in power. They were simply continuing it. It made it easy for them. The BNP had sent a delegation to Washington, D.C., where I live. They did their level best to convince the United States State Department to uphold the ban to allow elections in Bangladesh without the Awami League. Why? Because they wanted to win a two-thirds majority, which is a majority to be able to amend the Constitution as they wish, which if the Awami League had participated in the elections, the BNP would never have on its own. That is what happened. That was the plan. And it is going swimmingly. However, as we've heard from constitutional experts, again, these things are sustainable for a while. They're never sustainable in the long term. What does the future hold? Yes, the Awami League is banned, but it still enjoys the support of at least 40% of the country. And as the BNP's governance failures continue and increase, as lawlessness continues and increases, and as the persecution of the Awami League continues, what do you think this 40% of the population is going to do? Does anyone believe that they are going to simply slowly forget about the Awami League and give up? We're talking of a country of 170 million people. 40% of the population is somewhere around 60 million people. Are they going to forget? Are they going to give up? No, that won't happen. What you have in Bangladesh's future right now, with this cover-up, with these extra constitutional acts, with the Constitution being disregarded, no rule of law, you have two certainties in Bangladesh. One, that every government, whether it's the Awami League in the future or not, any politician is only going to think short term, that I have 5 years to do whatever I want, make as much money as I want, get as much revenge as I want, and then I am out. Number two, political retribution, this politics of retribution that was brought in by Yunus and Jamaat-e-Islam, this is guaranteed to continue, 100%. Whether the Awami League will come back, someone else will come, there will be constant political retribution. And as we heard from our constitutional expert, what is the most likely final scenario in that case? At some point in the future, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, Bangladesh will most likely end up in a civil war. That is the most likely scenario that is facing Bangladesh today. The only way to stop that future is for international powers to stop covering up the violations, the extra-constitutional mechanisms, the human rights abuses, the killings, the indemnification of killings, is to act against that, and the time to act against that is now. There will be elections in a few years. However, the BNP, with its 2/3 majority, will, I am sure, make several amendments to the constitutions to guarantee that the elections are rigged in their favor, that they stay in power. They will attempt that. Whether that will succeed or not is another story. And in the meantime, the Awami League supporters and activists, as they're pushed deeper underground, as their backs are pushed harder against the wall, eventually it will reach a boiling point. This is not sustainable. So the only option really, if human rights are to be upheld, if democracy is to be upheld, if stability is to be upheld, is for the international community to step in now, acknowledge the atrocities of the last 2 years. If you're going to demand justice, justice has to be demanded for all. Justice must be equal. One-sided justice is not justice. And the last thing I would like to address, which has been brought up, is about the future. How can there be reconciliation? And there was mention of the July Charter. It is true, there were some excellent ideas in the July Charter. Bangladesh, without a doubt, needs more checks and balances. However, the fundamental flaw which made the July Charter unsustainable was that it left out, again, not just the largest political party, but all progressive parties. All progressive liberal political parties in Bangladesh were left out of the July Charter discussions altogether. This was a very one-sided charter, and even if by any chance the BNP had adopted it, it would have been rejected by half the population, the supporters of half the political parties in the country, and it would not have been sustainable because it would have been seen as unfair and one-sided. Change, reform cannot be imposed. It will not be sustainable. It must be done with the will of the people, with the will of the majority of the people in an inclusive way. I'm not talking about fringe parties like Jamaat-e-Islam, who the reality is Jamaat has never polled more than 3 to 10% in Bangladesh. They do not represent a mainstream political party in Bangladesh. And because of their history, because of the genocide, their actions during our liberation war, the majority of the country hates them. Even majority of BNP supporters hate Jamaat. What you're seeing now is political expediency. On that note, I would like to conclude my comments, my remarks, and thank you again to all the organizers and to Chris Blackburn for hosting this. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Joy. He's left us with some really stark choices, like what is going to happen with Bangladesh's future. Will there be reconciliation? I hope so, because if there isn't, I'd hate to see what's going to happen. You can't just marginalize millions of people in Bangladesh. So thank you to all distinguished speakers. Thank you for attending here. It's been quite a hot but a really good discussion. And thank you to all those at home. We were going to have question and answers, but unfortunately we've run out of time, and we've gone over slightly. My timekeeping's to blame. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Well done.
হ্যালো হ্যালো আস্তে আস্তে সব বাড়াইয়া দেবে আগে আস্তে আস্তে সব বাড়াইয়া দেবে থ্যাংক ইউ সবরে